Okay, and then finally on the financial sanctions and controls, we also now have a ban on rental bidding. Now, do you remember when Alicia told you that we were in a position where we were getting about 10 applications per property? What would happen then was people would hire their offers. You know when you're trying to buy a property, you go to best and final, and people will always offer more. We can't do that anymore. This is quite simple. You cannot encourage or accept a rent higher than the advertised price. Now, earlier, Alicia said 2.5% she anticipates the rents will go up by. Well, I think it'll be more, because do you know what landlords are going to do? Try the rent at the higher amount, particularly if it's tenanted and you've got some time for you to try and secure a tenant. We're going to push the rents up for you, and we're going to try and achieve that rent. And if we don't, within a couple of weeks, we'll drop it down. But what will happen is it will push rents higher, which is the same thing that happened when the government introduced the tenant fee ban. It was to help the tenants, but it just astronomically increased their rent. The question was, how much can you increase your rent by? Now, in the old world, unless your tenancy agreement has a restriction, some tenancy agreements say that you can increase the rent by RPI, CPI, whatever the calculation is. If you have one of those in your tenancy agreement, well, then that's the maximum that you can increase it by. But if you don't have that rent review clause in your tenancy agreement, and therefore there's no restriction, you can increase it to whatever you goddamn want, to whatever market value is. And in the period over the course of the last 5 years, since the rents have gone crazy through the roof, we actually increased one of our tenancies by a massive increase of £550 a month. But it's because they'd been living in a property since 2007 at £550, and this property was now worth £1,200. So he had benefited from an undervalued property for all of that period of time. And the landlord didn't want to do that anymore with what's going on, and we increased it by £550. That will be successful in a tribunal as long as you're at market rent. If you're going greedy and you're going above market rent, I'm going to talk about rent increases next, you will not be successful. So market rent is the answer unless your tenancy agreement states otherwise. Now, with this rental bidding, what they're saying here is it's £7,000 for every time you do this, and we can get fined for this if we're the agent and we're accepting it on your behalf. But this can become quite costly, because if you get fined £7,000 this year when you market your property, and then next year you do the same thing again and you get another £7,000 fine, because you've now been prosecuted more than once, you'll get an additional £7,000 fine. So it all of a sudden becomes 21 grand for accepting a few quid more on the rent. So make sure that you're marketing your price at what you're happy with and that you don't accept anything above it. Rent increases. This one is quite a big one, okay? So in the tenancy agreements now, it doesn't matter what your tenancy agreement says. It could say anything it wants about a rent review clause. It is null and void. They no longer exist. And the only way that you can increase your rent in the new world is by using a Section 13. Anybody ever used one? Yeah? Anybody ever negotiated with the tenants and just done an agreement without using a Section 13? Yeah, few of you. That's how we do it. We try and do what humans do and have a chat with them and say, right, the landlord's looking for this, what's your thoughts? And we agree mutually. And sometimes you'll do a renewal of contract into a new fixed term. Sometimes you'll just agree that moving forward the rent is this amount, and we agree it in writing. And there's no need for official Section 13s. We only use Section 13 notices when the tenant doesn't agree, because that is the way that you enforce a rent increase, through a Section 13. But now we can only increase the rent using Section 13 moving forward. You cannot negotiate, you cannot agree in writing, you can only do it with Section 13. And just like every other notice, they have increased the period of notice that you need to give to the tenant from 1 month to 2. Not the end of the world, truth be told. If we can be prepared and understand, you can only increase it once annually, which is the law now anyway. But the big change here and the big problem here is this. The tenant already legally can take that Section 13 to court, right? To what's called tribunal. And the assessor, the tribunal, will assess the rent increase and deem it fair or unfair. If they deem it fair, in the current world, the rent increase is backdated to the date that you sent the notice from effective date. Does that make sense? In the new world, it's not going to be backdated, and the rent increase will only take effect from the determination date of the tribunal. So, we sent a Section 13 in April. of last year, and we got a decision in October, 6 months. Now, my concern is this. Tenants are going to use this to delay the rent increase, even if they understand and accept that it's fair. And because I have concerns that they are going to be a few more tribunals heard, the wait time is likely to be longer. So bear in mind we can only put our rents up once annually, but if that process takes 10 months to get a decision, that's actually once biannually. This could become a problem. Now, the government did think about it, and what they've decided is that they're going to make the tenant pay. So I was like, great, that will deter them from doing it. They're going to ask the tenant to pay 47 quid. So 47 quid is probably nothing in the grand scheme of the rent increase that you're proposing. But again, let's hope that the tenants stay reasonable, and I've got a bit of tips and advice for you. What we're going to do as agents is we are going to do best price guides. We're going to provide comparables. We're going to still have that conversation with our tenant before serving them a formal notice. And we're going to try and get an agreement and then serve the notice, right? So you're still being human and reasonable. But we'll just have to see what happens, because tenants will have this in their back pocket. And the other insulting thing is the tribunal can also, if the tenant is able to provide financial evidence of financial hardship, the tribunal can kick the rent increase a further 2 months down the line just to help the tenant. Don't worry about your mortgages or your costs or anything you've had to cover. The tenant will be okay. The tenant has to pay for the tribunal. That is good news, because at least the landlord doesn't have to pay for that one. Okay, so just please bear that in mind. But remember, if you have issued a Section 13 before today, then that is still valid and you can still run with the old timescales.